country in face of all this division and hostility. Now, the president could tap into that, frankly, I think, but for whatever reasons, he seems to have one gear.
So tell us a little bit about the kind of advertising you did. Joe's one of the most creative political ad makers ever, but...
Well, I think the ad that crystallizes the message of the campaign and also crystallizes why a lot of those Republicans did cross over was an ad that was called Honor, and it was a set in Gettysburg in the battle for Little Round Top Civil War, which a lot of people in Washington and had a little ask, like, are you guys really going to raise the Civil War in a race for the Senate in Alabama? But what it was there was a colonel named William Oates who was in the Confederate forces and led them 3 times up the hill to take Little Round Top. At the top was a guy from Maine, a colonel named Chamberlain, who his men were out of ammunition, ordered them to fix bayonets, and in desperation charged to repel the Confederate attack. And this is all sort of in a documentary style. And then as the screen dissolves, you find out the narrator is Doug Jones. And Jones says, what brought those 2 brave men together, one from Alabama and one from Maine, was war. 2 sides believing so strongly in their cause that they were willing to die for it. And then went into how right now we see this division in our country and it seems like we're coming apart. I want to go to Washington, meet the representative from Maine and the other countries, not on a battlefield, but to find common ground, because there's honor and civility and compromise. And that ad, that was him. That came from him. The theatrics of that first part of the spot was a real documentary of what happened. But what happened where people got all of a sudden, with all this chaos, all this division that's going on around us right now, here was a guy who didn't want to have, we're not going to war, guys. We're actually, there's honor in compromise and civility and in finding common ground. And that got a lot of those Republicans to open up and consider Doug Jones as somebody they should think about voting for the first time in their lives.
So one last thing on Alabama. In the elevator on the way down to the victory speech, what'd you tell him?
On the way down, we told him, don't thank anybody. Because, as
and
you
what'd
know,
he do?
He went out, we all tell actually Bob's got a better style than I do at this, because he always tells his candidate, thank them, but thank them at the end. Because what happens is the networks come live, every network's on you on election night, and you start thanking the state rep from here and the mayor from over there and my sister Sue and people, and the networks, by the time you're done thanking everybody, CNN and ABC and everybody is cutting away and saying, well, that was Doug Jones in Victory Night in Alabama. So you always want to go out and do your message. So we told him, don't thank anybody, get on your message. And of course he went out and thanked the team. It was really gracious of him. It
was unusually gracious, yeah. And the things he said about you were quite eloquent. Okay, I'm going to move on because I want you to tell the story of how this happened. As I said about what I'm about to describe, you were a pioneer, as I said, in using the internet and social media, turning them into campaign tools. How did you see the potential? How did you actuate it? And do you think it's been good, bad, or mixed for the political process?
Well, look, I think coming up in politics, learning a lot from people like you and others in the party, I was always just considered myself lucky to be able to learn from the people who mentored me and were able to teach me. But I'd again been this San Jose State engineering student. I'd always been sort of wondering what was going to change people's lives more, technology or politics. I'd argue today that the cell phones changed more people's lives than any politician I ever worked for. But by 2004, I had sort of straddled those two worlds, technology and politics. I knew enough. I'd put it this way, there were a ton of people in politics at the time in 2003 that didn't understand a whole lot about technology, and there were a lot of people in technology that didn't understand anything about politics. And I was just sort of dangerous enough in knowing both those worlds to see that maybe, just maybe, you could use this technology to empower people in a totally different way and run a campaign completely different from the bottom up, empowering the people and the supporters to lift the candidate to victory. And when Howard Dean called me and when we started talking about it, I was pretty emphatic that if I ran another or got involved at that level, because running a presidential campaign is not for the faint of heart. That I'd only do it if I could do it, if he'd give me the chance to do it differently. And so part of it was his vision of saying, okay, yeah, you can do that. Now on the goods, no. I was naive. I thought this would be this great empowering thing, and I think we've gone through with Obama and through, there were several bursts that made me feel, yeah, this is what I kind of thought would happen, and this is great. But the reality is, instead of empowering people to come together, it's put up. We're all in our own silos, and we're all, it's easy to manipulate. It's a lot easier to manipulate people online than it is to manipulate people on television. At least everybody sees what's happening on television, and so I think I'm actually now looking at it as, and then you look at the hacking and the bots. I mean, in the Jones campaign, we were tracking 10,000 bots that were posting 65,000 posts per hour, all doing fake yearbook and things like that. You can't tell me, I mean, we won by 23,000 votes, but we don't know that thousands of people would have voted for us or didn't believe the allegations because of what, not people, but bots were doing. And the problem with that is you don't know it's a bot when you retweet it, right? So it starts to, so I think we're in a different era now where things have to, we have to be more vigilant as citizens on the information flow that's happening online.
Yeah, but don't you think it, and I think you did this, it democratized fundraising in a really profound way. I mean, you guys raised $40 million before the Iowa caucuses, almost all of it online. John Kerry was the ultimate nominee, raised $250 million before the convention, a very high percentage of that online. I mean, in his acceptance speech, he said, I'm going to do something Franklin Roosevelt could never do. Go to johnkerry.com, and we raised millions of dollars. And I mean, it crashed. The system crashed. Yeah. We raised millions of dollars in a few minutes.
Well, that was in the early days, 2003, 2004. That was the fun part. Trying to crash your own system. And in the Dean campaign, we'd like celebrate every time we crashed it. And yes, it totally. It changed that, but the response wasn't. The interesting thing was the Republican Party's response at the time was not, oh, wow, we've got to go do that. We've got to create a low-dollar fundraising ability with people and get them to give to us. It was, we've got to change the rules or fight for rules that allow billionaires and lots of people to write big checks. And then the problem was, so it wasn't two parties going to engaging people. And then just to not be too altruistic about how great the Democratic Party is, we then said, oh shoot, well, if they're going to go by those rules, we're going to do them too. And now, yes, we have empowered people to give to these campaigns, and they are, but the big money is even bigger than it ever was, which is not what I thought was going to happen. That's right. I think it went wrong.
Yeah, but I think without it, the big money would overwhelm the system totally.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to talk a little bit more about your engineering side. We have all these new bells and whistles in campaigns, including most famously data analytics. But I'm old-fashioned enough to still think that the message matters, and matters decisively, that the medium can't be the message. How do you assess the messages of the Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump campaigns, and why did she lose what so many assumed was an unlosable race?
Well, one, I think the message does matter. I think one of the things that's happened, again, getting back to the sort of declining candidates and leadership, is that the more poll-driven and data-driven we've gotten, the message has sort of become rote or almost programmed. And also there's too much belief in the data analytics, in my view, in politics today. The candidate does matter. It's like that's the honor spot and the message that came from Doug Jones. That's what moved that election. Not, we bought a ton of digital ads, and but it was him. And his ability to connect. I think there's two things.
Explain data analytics briefly to them.
Look, I mean, you get to the point where I think there's a thing about the Obama, may have been the 2012 campaign, where they knew if a woman liked the Ocean's 11 Facebook page and got an email from George Clooney, she would give, on average, $57 to the campaign. And guess what? The analytics pretty much proved out that that every woman who got the email from him who liked that page, gave them money. So you can really, the level to which we can follow somebody and know what the trigger is that will get them to vote for us or to follow us or to engage and give money is just, that's just one piece of data. I mean, there's tons of that. I think getting back to there's two things. Trump understood how much power social media can have to engage people who do not normally participate in the process. And you don't have to get a whole lot of people to participate in these two parties' primary process to overrun either party. And he proved that. That's what he proved. It wasn't about message. So, I mean, he had a message, yes, and his people responded to it. But it was his direct using social media to directly communicate to 17 or 18 million people directly who were following his followers and bypassing everybody, just communicating directly to them. And in a process in which only 25 to 30 million total were going to participate in the Republican primaries. So you're sitting there every day talking directly with 15, 16, 17 million people who are all retweeting you to their friends, and you don't have to get a whole, it's already baked in the cake at that point that you're going to overrun everybody in the party. That's what happened with him. On in my view, on the Democratic side, I think it's going to be hard to tell in the end how much of this. Well, first of all, to not have polled in Michigan, in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, to have relied, in my view, on the data analytics that were telling them that those were all fine.
98% chance they were going to win Michigan.
Yeah, how you don't, you've got $2 billion. How you don't poll in Michigan, I don't care. Data analytics could be like, great, yeah, wonderful. Why you don't take a look for 50 grand to make sure is like just amazing to me. I will say this though, I think we will not likely know ever. I mean, I know all the officials say, hey, we don't know if the bots and the Russians and everybody, changed the election. We know they didn't change votes, but when you have 10,000 bots doing 65,000 posts a minute telling people it's a fake yearbook and that the allegations are false.
Against Doug Jones.
Against Doug,
or against Roy Moore.
It's Roy Moore. Who's going to tell me that 10,000 people weren't impacted by that in the state of Alabama or in Wisconsin or in Michigan? I just think it doesn't make sense that that all this is happening, but no one was impacted by it, right? We buy ads on Facebook, but of course no one was impacted by them. It's like it's a fantasy that's true, but we'll never be able to show or know that X number changed.
In some ways, you've been talking about this all through this conversation, but I want to get to it specifically and talk about why politics seems so poisonous now. Is social media, the bots, all of that, are they a symptom or are they a cause? And if they're a symptom, what are the underlying forces that are driving a polarization that goes far beyond the politics you and I lived in 25 and 30 years ago?
I think it is the ability to silo and live in our own information diet, and get reinforced by that diet, and by those divisions. And the other thing I think is there's like a massive lack of leadership in trying to in a leader that can pull the country together. I mean, that can appeal to the common good and the common cause and the common purpose. I think that is what Doug Jones tapped into in Alabama, and I think that I personally think what I was seeing in Alabama is that hunger is really out there with the American people. But in lieu of that, in lieu of anybody calling for, challenging the American people to come together. And by the way, the only people that are doing that are a bunch of 17 and 18 and 16-year-olds in Florida. But that's where the leadership's coming from. It's not coming, something happened where that's disappeared. And when you don't have a some national figure that can pull us together, then you're going to have people pulling apart. I do think that both parties are in deep, deep trouble because they're becoming obsolete. If you only have, if you only have 30 million people who vote in the Democratic primaries, and that's all it is.
You mean for president? Yeah.
For president, yeah. But you have John Kerry and John Edwards and Dick Gephardt and Howard Dean are really running around talking to the same 30 million people and trying to get their, labor, each piece of it, and trying to, and in each state. And somebody, so when a Oprah Winfrey comes along, I'm just using her as a great example, is she comes along with, 40 million followers. I don't know how many followers, but tons of them on social media. 5 million. First of all, she's going to get her fair share of some of that Democratic primary vote. And if 5 million new people come in to vote for her, just 5. Anybody think out of 330 million Americans, a couple 100 million, 240 million Americans in this country who are not voting age eligible, voting eligible, citizens and registered? Does anybody here think she can't get 5 million people who've never shown up in a Democratic primary to come out for her? And if she does, what's Senator so-and-so going to do about it? How's he going to do that? So both parties, and that's what Trump did. Trump slipped the party's grip on deciding and having an impacting decision on who the nominee is. And frankly, Bernie almost did it on the Democratic side in 2016. By 2020, it's going to be even a bigger difficulty for either party to maintain any control over their nominating process.
Could a politician capture people's imagination that way? I mean, we've seen it in our lifetime, but...
Yeah, I mean,
our lifetimes, not yours. Well, you did because Obama did this.
Yeah. No, Obama's a good example. I mean, I'm not saying there hasn't been, people who can tap in, a politician who can tap into it. Certainly Obama did. I think the real problem here is we're no longer Bob knows this, every 4 years the party meets and they decide, well, maybe if we move Iowa up or we move New Hampshire, or we move California, we just moved California up. This is going to solve that we'll nominate somebody really good if we do it that way, right? And the reality is, no, we're way beyond that. I mean, we are way beyond that in terms of the party's inability to attract more Americans into the primary system to actually feel like they have ownership over who the nominee is, to actually, basically we all sit home, watch this crazy fight over here on the Republican side, and we don't really care, we'll figure out who they do, and this crazy fight over here on the Democratic side, and we don't really care, and we'll find out who, and then I'll decide between the two. And then you get to November, and you look at the two, and the entire country says, what the hell just happened? How did we get to this? And you get Donald Trump. That's literally because both parties have, I think, not updated how they get out there and connect with people in a way that actually gets more voters involved in the process and involved in ownership.
How do they do that?
I mean, look, one thing that would be interesting is internet voting, right? I mean, have the candidates go out there and have some way for everybody to recommend or something. I mean, somehow to get people actually, all of the people actually involved in, or a lot more than the 15, 20 million. I don't think it's going to happen because we move primaries around or the order around. In fact, I think more likely that we're going to make it even more important to be famous. You move California up early, who is going to be, what no-name Howard Dean, who nobody knew with his crazy campaign manager, is going to somehow get famous fast enough to run a multi-gajillion-dollar campaign in California against some really famous person, right? And that's part of what was happening with Trump. You start moving California up, you start moving bigger places up and making it more, more money to do it, you're turning off more people who feel like they don't have a say. California does. I mean, this is a death spiral, I think, that we're in, that both parties are in, and they haven't thought this out about how. I mean, Bob's question. There should be, we used to have these commissions on what to do after the McGovern committee. How there should be a real groupthink in the party about how do we as a Democrat, I'm talking as a Democrat right now, but I think both parties should do it. How do we become more relevant to the people? What is, the platform things at the convention are ridiculous now. Everybody knows that whatever platform gets passed, the presidential candidate's not going to run on it if he or she doesn't want to do it.
So you just predicted that maybe we're entering an era of celebrity politics principally because the two parties don't know how to think this through. So I'm going to ask you for some other predictions. First, what's your prognosis for the 2018 elections and why?
Right now, I think I'd be relatively, not really, I'm pretty solid that we'll win, the Democrats will win the House. I actually think they'll win the Senate too. I know that's not one that many others think, but I think there's a real chance that both Arizona and Nevada are possibilities. And I also think in Tennessee, Bredesen, the popular governor, could maybe pull that one out and win that. And I think, I definitely think, look, the energy right now, Donald Trump is fueling two things. Massive energy with Democrats, minorities, women, young people. they're all voting in these primaries and in the midterms and the specials at higher number, at stronger force and percentage than they have in past specials or midterms. But the other thing is, there really is, yes, there are people who will stand by him and the Republican Party who are Republicans no matter what. But there is a growing group of Republicans, and we're seeing it. I think you're telling me about Kentucky today.
There's a special election in Kentucky today in a district, House district, state House district, that Trump won something like 73 to 24, something like that. And the Democrat won tonight 68 to 32. So it's like an 85 or 86 point swing.
Right.
Suburbs of Louisville.
And that's what I'm saying. There is a growing unease with a significant enough segment of the Republican Party, this sense of...
And independence.
And independent, yeah, definitely with independence. That's just, how do we end the chaos? Just tell me how I can end the chaos. And so now what I'm saying is, I don't believe the decision in November of 2018 is going to be partisan. I think it will come out partisan, because the question is, okay, I'm going to look at these two candidates. I don't care if they're Republican or Democrat. I'm talking about these voters that are in this. Just tell me which one's going to add to the division and chaos, and which one is going to help end the chaos. Not by being a screaming chaos person, right? And so that what happened with Doug Jones, they looked at Roy Moore and they looked at Doug Jones, and they knew they wanted common ground. They did not want to add to the chaos in Washington. Roy Moore was going to do that. And Doug Jones, who wanted common ground, who believed that there was honor and civility and compromise. Now that sounds like somebody who's not going to add to the chaos and actually is going to try to get something done for me. And I think that's the candidate. So if you're a Democrat and you're nominating, you want to, people get angry when they hear this, but it's not necessarily the year to where the most angry Democrat is the best candidate to put up in 2018. Even though a lot of Democrats are really angry and would love that, that's not how we did it in Alabama. And if we can win in Alabama, a state like the Kentucky example that Trump won, by 28 points, I think you're going to see a lot of these, +7 Republican districts and +4 and +9s fall. I just don't. I think people they're pushing away. They're literally pushing away some of these people into thinking about voting Democrat for the first time.
Second, and related to that, what's likely to be the ultimate fate of the Trump presidency?
Oh man. Well, I don't see. People cannot. That's what I'm saying about this feeling of chaos and being on the edge. People just want to be able to sleep at night. They don't want to wake up the next morning and still be, have that constant sense of chaos. I don't see how it sustains itself for 4 years. That's just me personally. I'm not talking about removal from office or something, but something has got to break. And it may be the 2018 election. It may be, if there's more of these Kentuckys on that day, on one day, maybe that will finally get the Republicans in Congress and Senate to think, and everybody to think we got to come together and stand up to the president if he's creating this chaos. But I really don't see how this the current status quo sustains for the next 3 years.
Third prognostication. Do you see any prospect of progress on gun safety? And if so, what will it tell us about the power of bottom-up politics? Because we've just lived through an extraordinary week. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree that we've been through an extraordinary week. I think this is much different than previous incidents like this and tragedies. Primarily, I think because these students can talk for themselves, and they're really, really articulate and calling the politicians out in ways that none of the other, Sandy Hook and some of these other, just weren't that kind of.
Well, 6 and 7-year-olds couldn't do it.
So, I mean, that's one. But the other thing I think is, look, I think this is maybe another one where we won't see the turning point until the November of 2018 election. In other words, that there may be legislative failures to do anything. There may be, really moving marches and rallies and them continuing to put their voice out there and call the politicians out. But it may take, that may still not wake these people up. And the only thing that I think will do it is, again, if in November, it turns out that a lot of people are thrown out who didn't do anything about it. And so I think, and there's Republican donors saying this. I mean, this is not,
one of the biggest donors to the party who lives in Florida has said he won't give any money anymore unless they move on gun control.
Right. So I do think, yes, I think we are going to, this is going to have an impact. There is going to be a big breakthrough. I just think it won't happen. It may not. I don't think it's going to happen until after November. I'd be surprised if it happens before November 18th. I think it's going to take that kind of blow, and it's going to take. That's what I think is going on. People have, a lot of us didn't think she had it in the bag, 2016, whatever. And a lot of people are like, that ain't going to happen again, not in 2018, this is driving this turnout and energy. And I think the other thing he is driving is this chaos exhaustion that's happening within his own party. And that's where you have this drop off. And I'll tell you, in Alabama, 100,000 people who voted in that Republican primary, 100,000 Republicans who voted in the Republican primary did not vote in the general election. Again, the Doug Jones, we only won by 23,000 votes. I mean, there's something, by the way, with historically off the charts African-American turnouts on the Democratic side. So there's something, this exhaustion thing I think is really real. That's what could be making the difference.
Is it exhaustion or anger too? I think a lot of it among African Americans, Latinos.
No, that's what I'm saying. It's he's driving anger and energy on with the Democratic base, but creating exhaustion in his own. In segments of his own party, that's what's causing these massive, big swings like the Kentucky thing, right? Because some Republicans aren't voting, but every Democrat is, or a lot of Democrats are.
So politics has changed at warp speed over the last 8, 12, 14 years. What do you think it'll look like in 10 years?
I'll tell you.
It's not a fair question, but I thought I'd ask it.
Well, no, look, when I did the Dean campaign, I tell people, the Dean campaign, people don't remember this. The Dean campaign in 2004, okay, Twitter didn't exist. YouTube didn't exist. The iPhone wasn't launched until 2007. We were doing it with literally hand puppets as far as the internet was back then. Broadband didn't really exist. It was just starting. People didn't, video was like this herky-jerky stuff. And so, in that world, we were able to do, raise, $50 million and break every record in the Democratic Party. We broke Bill Clinton's record that he set when he ran for re-election in '96. By 4 or 5 months later, John Kerry was breaking that record 5 times over. And by 2008, Barack Obama was raising $500 million online for the 2008 campaign. All that is is the tools. The tools are getting that much, that powerful, right? That's That's the difference between a campaign with no YouTube, no Twitter. Facebook was on 2 college campuses when we were in the Dean campaign, versus what we've got today, and stuff that that Obama didn't have. And so I think AI is going to be. Some of this stuff gets scary in terms of how we're going to be able to target people tomorrow, not 10 years from now, and literally how we can get 3 of your friends to tell you that you need to take a look at this candidate, but we know that those 3 friends have that kind of influence on you. So, and you don't even know it. It's just like, it's one of these really, there's so much, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger. What happens when we can predict what you're going to do, and again, they're already doing that. Literally, okay, you're going to vote, and you're going to vote for the other guy, so what can I do to get you not to vote? What negative stuff do I put in your stream? How many bots do we jam on you to make sure that you just say, screw this, I'm not voting for him or her? And that's already happening now. What I'm saying is it's going to be much more powerful and much more seamless, and you're going to be even less aware of it. Unless the Mueller indictments, unless the citizenry starts to actually realize that this is going on and takes enough responsibility before I tweet this, is it a bot or not? Is it some fake story? I have some doubts about our capacity as citizens in our current state to do that. In fact, actually what's going on right now is, oh man, this is great hit on Trump, I'm retweeting that. Well, I didn't know that it came from, from I don't know which bots would have sent that, but you know what I'm saying. I'm just trying to, this is going to be, I think, a real challenge to democracy, because, and this is one of the things, we have opened up a massive Trojan horse into all of our homes, into all of it's sitting in our pockets, it's in everything we do, and it's not just the good candidates and the party you believe in that's using it and trying to impact what you're thinking about. It is now you used to have to get Ted Koppel on ABC Nightline to God, what was that guy's name? Posner. To get Posner to come on ABC Nightline and sort of put the Russian line out to everybody. Now you just create a site and you feed it to the Clinton army that was happy to use negative information against Trump, or the Trump army that's happy to use negative information against her, or against Black Lives Matter, or against the Nazis. And by the time it's all done, we all can't stand each other, and somebody gets elected to something, but this is the fear right now I have is it's going to take amazing vigilance by the companies like Twitter and Facebook, vigilance by our government, vigilance by the parties to actually think through how they survive in this digital world and engage people in a different way, and vigilance as citizens, that we're just not tearing each other down, but that there's a commonality and a common good and a common cause, that we're all in this together. And the problem is it may take a real national leader, along the lines of a JFK or a Ronald Reagan even. And again, not to get in, but that has that ability, that capacity to appeal to the common good, because otherwise I think the technology and our own inability or own need to the tribalization, I guess is what I'd call it, of our politics is really destructive force in our country right now.
Okay, let's turn this over to the audience for some questions. Someone's got a mic. Adam?
Hey, thank you for coming in.
Sure.
On that very optimistic note, I have a question for both of you guys. Do you think there's any chance that in the next few years, with all these seams that we see ripping apart in our country, there's a chance that we're going to have some bigger institutional reform, whether to our two-party system and seeing them kind of how we saw both parties in 2016 break apart from top down, or a change to the electoral college system, or a change to the primary system that would give people more faith and optimism in our political system? Because right now I think like cockroaches have better approval rating than Congress or something like that, which is pretty low. So.
Well, I mean, I'd say, look, my optimism comes from your generation, right? I think there's only one my own view is, the only thing that the youngest generations in this country are intolerant of is intolerance. I mean, there's not like a whole lot of, hey, your skin color's this or that. I mean, it exists, but not like it does in the older generations. So that commonality, that generation one of Americans, it's you guys. And I think to the extent you show up at the polls in 2018 and show up to change the gun laws and things like that, I mean, the more empowered you get, the better the country's going to be. Because I really believe that. I think that's when I do my whole cadence about we got to be vigilant about this, vigilant about that, the one big optimistic thing I do see is you. And if there was the boomers, they're not the quickest to get out of the way. You've sort of seen that. And so, I think that generational fight is going to happen probably in the 2020 presidential elections, I think. But I think it's what your generation decides in that election. I mean, your impact on that election. Millennials are now and I'm talking about all the way down, but millennials are now the biggest generation in this country, bigger than the boomers. So, and we're now getting to the point where enough of that generation is in the voting population that I think it's going to have a huge, massive impact in 2018 and in 2020. It's more unified than the rest of America. And so if we're going to it's really fascinating, but I keep saying some leader's got to come along that's going to pull us together. It may not be a person. It may be your generation.
Another question?
So I have a question more about ethics. Do you hold yourself partially accountable for how your candidate behaves once they are elected to office? And if you do, how do you maintain a career in politics while only supporting candidates that you fully believe in?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'd say that I've gotten to a point where I tend to I don't have to work for anybody. There was a day when I was out banging on doors saying, please hire me, please hire me. I understand that. But that's, I'm not there. So I think that I can work for a Doug Jones because I believe in Doug Jones. To answer your question though, I don't get that involved. I didn't elect Doug Jones to represent me. I helped elect him to represent the people of Alabama. And he's probably going to vote in ways that I would not want him to. Being from California and, it's a different thing. So I don't, it's the same thing. Even when I'm working for them, I'm working I did Jerry Brown's campaign for governor in 2010 against Meg Whitman. It's about Jerry Brown representing California, not not me. And so I think most of us, want to work for people we believe in. I will tell you that's tougher than it used to be, to find somebody, the people that you really can believe in. But it's, again, I think it's hard for partisans to understand that there are 435 districts in Congress. Not one of them's the same. They all have different problems locally and things like that, different mixes of gun owners and not, and things like that, people who hunt and don't. And, a Democrat who runs in Alabama is going to be different than a Democrat who runs in New York City. I mean, that's just the way it is. So you're not, as you're trying to, find people you believe in. How are they, but who is, what I'm saying is it's not necessarily an issue. It's more, how are they somebody who's going to represent their district and have principles and values? And by the way, they should reflect the values of the district, not mine or the state. That's how I live with, if you want to, how do you live with yourself? Well, it's, if they're doing a good job representing their folks, that's they'll probably vote against each other. I've probably got, some member from Massachusetts who's voting completely differently than somebody in Texas.
Another question?
Hi, my name is Misa. So back to the Facebook data kind of collecting and stuff, I was just wondering if you think that there's anything morally wrong about that, or if Facebook has any kind of moral responsibility, or if you think that when we sign up or use programs like that, we just open ourselves up to that.
Well, first of all, look, a lot of these companies are really, and God, what level of naivete do I want to talk about? But, they would say that they're just trying to serve you better, right? That they know that you like this kind of pizza, to make sure you get served up a pizza ad that talks about the pizza you want. That's good for the advertiser, and it's good for you, right? So a lot of it is, from what they're trying to do makes sense. From what an advertiser or a political campaign can do, same thing though. It's not just what pizza, it starts to get into, what are your likes, dislikes, and I think most Americans are a little clueless about how much of their, how much they're leaving out around for those that want to sell them something or get them to vote, are using that information. And what's even scarier is that a foreign entity can be feeding you stuff because they know you like certain things, and now they can say the candidate you're thinking of voting for is against you on this stuff, and it's got nothing to do with any reality they're playing on all that data too. And so this is a new world. That's what I'm saying. I think we've crossed a different threat. It's like anything. They couldn't have done this in 2003. Just like I couldn't have done it. YouTube didn't exist. Those things. We're now getting to the point, though, where the tools are so powerful, and what people can know is like just, off the charts, that, and at the same time, you haven't sort of been educated, or educated is not the right word, but sensitized to it. And I think we're just getting doses of that with the Mueller indictment, for instance, on what the Russians were doing. That maybe that's the kind of thing that'll make people start to think twice before they tweet, or like you do now when you're going to click on a link in your email, right? Like you used to click on it all the time. We don't do that anymore, right? I mean, most of us. You can get tricked into still doing it, but you kind of look at the email and it's got a link and you're going like, do I really, and you don't do it. I think there's some part of that we got to hurry up and catch up to. That's all.
So you think it's an individual responsibility primarily?
Yeah, absolutely.
Although companies like Facebook are now putting a lot of money into trying to deal with this.
Yeah, no, I think two things. One, you want to intercept any foreign entity that's trying to do something. That's the government and companies doing that. But then we've got to, when you get that giddy feeling that you've got this one's too good not to pass on Trump or pass on her or whatever, it's not necessarily coming from Joe Trippi, right? It's coming from, and how do we identify, how do we fight that and fight that urge, right? Because you're in the political battle, you've been a volunteer, you've been online, and now this thing shows up on your Twitter feed and you can't wait to hit retweet. Well, that's what was going on. And I don't think most Americans had a clue that they were caught up in that, is what I'm saying.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question.
If Doug Jones proves that what the people really want is a candidate that wants to cross the aisle and wants to challenge us to come together, why do you think it is that, like, on a more macro scale, we sort of perpetually enact this trend? Like, do you think that it's more top-down, where we're influenced into this schism, or are we saying something different than what our actions actually suggest?
No, I would say fundamentally what's happened with a lot of is, I put it this way, most people are not paying attention. I don't mean that in a mean way. I just mean you're working hard, you're going about your life, you're going to school, you're busting your rear to get to pay the bills and all that stuff, and you're not paying a lot of attention. And a very small number of people actually decide who you get to vote for. In other words, a very small number. I can guarantee this is the number. If you go look at the 2008 primaries and add everything up, and I've done this, 7% of the voting eligible population of this country made Barack Obama the nominee of the Democratic Party. 5% of the voting eligible population of this country made Donald Trump the nominee of the Republican Party. Now, that's it, tiny group. And what's happening is the only people who are bothering are people who are all energized at the extreme to, good or bad, I'm not saying, but, if 95% of us aren't voting on it, or not part of the group that made that person you end up with two nominees, one picked by 7%, one picked by 5%. What is that? The other 85% of the people are now coming to vote in November, and they're looking at these two candidates that were picked in these low voting primaries and going, why don't we have better choices in it? Or whatever, the stuff you hear every 4 years, right? So what I'm saying is, what I think the parties haven't realized that, look, you had two parties. They picked their candidates in a smoke-filled room. Then they realized, oh crap, we're going to have to hold a couple primaries to make people feel like they have a say. So we'll hold a few primaries to see how our hand-picked candidates do, and then with a little input from the people, we'll still pick our candidate. Now we're into the 60s, right? And they gradually always trying to keep control. The Democratic Party, we got to the point where we nominate, but we have superdelegates that can clean up anything at the convention that the people screwed up out there by picking the wrong guy. Never happened, but that's how it was. So now you've got these parties that were always trying to give up as little control as possible and keep the pool of people voting in these things small because that gave them control, or gave the, and so guess what? The internet came, guys. It doesn't work anymore. You're about to be overrun because somebody, I tell you what, if I'm the Green Party, why run as the Green Party? Just run in the Democratic primary, scream at the top of your lungs that you want to shut down every nuclear power plant in America if people elect you, and see if you can get 6% of the voting eligible population to vote in the Democratic Party for you and overrun the Democratic Party the way Donald Trump did. I'm not trying to denigrate the Green Party or any of that. I'm just saying that this is what's going on. We've got such a low interest level in the partisan politics. More people are registering as independents. They're not even participating in party primaries. And so like both parties are bleeding into independent. We only pick party candidates, not an independent candidate. So it's this death spiral. And I think the parties are responsible for trying to figure that out. How do we, and me and people like me, how do we change that? How do we get people engaged at a different level than they've been?
The only thing I would add to that is the defects of the system are often self-correcting. And it may be that we've reached the point where I see now intense engagement in politics among people who before were kind of indifferent or didn't care. And that may be what happens over the next several years. And I don't know how the party structures will react to that, but they won't have any choice but to accommodate to it. So this was a terrific conversation. I want to thank the audience who came out, as I said, on what is for California a cold night. I want to thank the staff who do a terrific job putting these things together. And I want to thank Joe Trippi, who, as I said before, is one of the most creative forces I have ever seen in all the years I was in American politics. So thank you all. See you back here on March 6th.